1, 2. Yeah, I'm on. Okay, I thought it was. All righty. I think the first bell rang, so if you don't mind, Mike or somebody should come here in just a second and get us a count of the daily Bible readers. So raise your hand up for me, please. And then if you also, after he gets done, if you need a book, you might want to raise both hands. Barry Cook will give you a book. So this may be a short lesson, and I guess that's good and bad. It was a hard lesson for me. I really had to study hard on it, and sometimes you're into some things you get into, and sometimes you just can't get into it. I just had a hard time getting into it. But before we start, I'll get Josh. Would you care to start me with a prayer?
Most gracious and loving Heavenly Father, we're so thankful to you for this beautiful Lord's Day that you blessed us with, for this opportunity that we've had to gather together as brothers and sisters of Christ to sing songs of praise in your name and study another lesson of your holy and divine word. We're thankful now, dear Father, for this period of Bible study that we're about to participate in. We pray that you be with Dusty, and be with the teachers downstairs, and pray that they have a ready remembrance of the lessons that they prepare, and that all of us that are listening, we pray, dear Father, that we can take of it, take much good from it, apply it to our daily Christian lives, and hopefully become better Christians in thy sight. Pray that you'll go with us throughout the remainder of this service, and everything that's said and done be in accordance with thy will. This we humbly pray in your Son Jesus' name. Amen.
So what I think I'm going to do first is if you actually read the lesson before we came, to me the introduction says the whole lesson. So I want to read the passages first, and then I want to talk about some of the similarities from Samson, and then things that will happen in the next chapters before Eric teaches next week. So let me start with reading our stuff here. Judges 17 and 1 through 13. Now there was a man from the mountains of Ephraim whose name was Micah. And if I mispronounce anything, I apologize. And he said to his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, on which you put a curse, even saying it in my ears, here's the silver with me. I took it. And his mother said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my son. So when he had returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son, to make a carved image and a molded image. Now therefore I will return it to you. Thus he returned the silver to his mother. Then his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to the silversmith. And he made it into a carved image and a molded image, and they were in the house of Micah. The man Micah had a shrine, and I think I'm saying this right, an ephod and household idols, and he consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. And remember this verse right here, because I'm going to refer back to this a little while. Verse 6. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite and was staying there. The man departed from the city of Bethlehem in Judah to stay wherever he could find a place. Then he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he had journeyed. And Micah said to him, where do you come from? So he said to him, I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm on my way to find a place to stay. Micah said to him, dwell with me, and be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year, a suit of clothes, and your sustenance. So the Levite went in. Then the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since I have a Levite as a priest. There's a whole lot of contradicting stuff being said right there, and I hope I can explain it. One of the things I want to mention that was kind of, a little odd, is that the 1,100 shekels. I don't know. The author and my companion here, he mentioned this too, and I know we beat Samson to death for 3 weeks, but if you remember, Delilah was offered 1,100 shekels by each one, when she betrayed Samson. And then this mother has 1,100, and it's not a rounded number. You think of 1,000 or 10,000 or $100, or whatever, but 1,100 is kind of an odd number. And so, in my mind, I can't help but think, is it repeating itself to show the fact of what's happening altogether? Is it just like we started with Gideon? The Lord delivers us, saves us, then we go back to the old ways. Then we go get help again, then we go back to the old ways. So I just wonder if it's also emphasizing the point that we're in this constant struggle. And earlier in the book, the Judges, it was more from the outside within, and now we're starting to change around, and it's like things are happening from inside and going out. And I hope I can expand that a little bit further. And then the other way is that Samson was buried with the tribe of Dan, and later on in chapter 18, which it doesn't talk about 18, but the next lesson jumps on over into like chapter 19. So there's a little bit of a story that's left out. Eventually, Micah loses everything, and it's from 5 men. It started by 5 men from the tribe of Dan itself. So it's kind of like it's all connected together. But that's just a few of the side notes that you won't really know about that I thought was kind of interesting. But when you start off reading, right off the bat, Micah is a thief. I mean, that's the first thing we find out. He's a thief. He stole 1,100 shekels from his mom. And I guess it's kind of ironic, contradictory. Micah's name means who is like Yahweh, which is another name for the Lord. So you're supposed to be by your name, you've been named by, similar to the Lord, doing like the Lord, and then you're a thief right off the bat, stole from your mother. So that's very contradictory. And then we go on in the next verse or so, it says he stole his silver from his mother, but his mother had set it aside to make an idol, which is nowhere mentioned at all to be done. That's the opposite of what they're supposed to do. So what does she do? Well, first she curses it. She puts a curse on it, and at that time, a curse was almost like a living thing to the people. It was like, that's what's going to happen. That's voodoo magic. It's you're in trouble. So whenever he gives the money back to her, she says, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my son." And what the authors tells us here is that the mother's hoping that she can. I can't take the curse away, but I'm hoping I can bless you and help you get out of this. And so to do that, she gives Micah 200 shekels of silver to make an idol. I mean, it says, where does it say here? 200 shekels of silver, and gave them to the silversmith, and he made it into a carved image and a molded image, and they were in the house of Micah. So, again, that's just contradictory. It's kind of like paganistic to me that they would trade off. I'm trying to honor the Lord, but then I'm going to do the opposite of what He's telling me to do. And then, let's see here. So he has the ephod, and I don't know, does anybody know what that is? I actually had to look it up. You do know what it is, Eric?
Well, I talked about it earlier too. I had to look it up as well, but it seems like it's like a priestly garment without sleeves.
That's right. That's right. So if you picture a robe being on, it's like a shirt over the top of it. You know how a lot of kids put on the white T-shirt, then they put a jersey of whoever their favorite person is on top. That's kind of the similarity of what you're looking at. So, like I said, I had to go look it up and figure out what it was, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right by looking at the definition. So he makes an ephod as well. That way he can give it to his son to be a priest for him. Now, let me find it here, what I'm trying to find. So, well, I lost my place. I'm sorry. What the other thing I was going to ask you is, or mention is, so we started off with 1,100 shekels, and we used 200 to make an idol, and there's 900. And she had said that she was committing it to the Lord, but there's nowhere else it's ever mentioned again in the reading. So I kind of wondered, what was it used for? Was it made bigger idols, or was it made to do what? You know, it never really says, but that's just another part of it that I was wondering. But Micah had made a shrine. He made an ephod, household idols, and he consecrated, which just means to declare. He made his son his priest. And one of the things that's wrong with that is, if you read in Deuteronomy, Moses, he specifically made this point: "But you shall seek the place where the Lord your God chooses out of all your tribes to put his name for his dwelling place. And therefore you shall go. There you shall take your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, the heave offering of your hand, your vowed offering, your freewill offerings, and the firstborn of your herd and flocks." So instead of doing what was commanded, Micah made his own place. He is just doing what, it's kind of like verse 6 says, what's right in your own eyes. And the reason I also said to remember verse 6 is it's referenced. Now, it's not exact word for word, but it's just a couple of words difference. If you look at the next chapter, first verse of the chapter 18, it says the same thing. You look at the first verse of chapter 19, it says the same thing. And then the last verse in the book of Judges also says the same thing. So again, to me, they're making a point that we're not doing what we're told to do. We're doing what's right in our own eyes, what we want to do, which is wrong. So this goes on for a little while. Then we see later on in verse 7, there's a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, and he was a Levite. So it does say that, let me make sure I say this correctly because I said it backwards in my head a minute ago. All priests were Levites, but not all Levites were priests. Okay, so that's something to remember, that he chose his son who wasn't a Levite, who shouldn't have been a priest anyway. So now he runs into a young man. But there are some things wrong with this as well. Number one, it says a young man. So let me see, it's Numbers chapter 8, verse 24. If you look there, it says specifically that you can't be a priest until you're 25. So we don't know exactly how old he is. It just says young man. So that could be one thing. And it also says in that same verse that they preach until they're 50. So you've got 25 good years to get in and get your work done. Which is kind of, I don't know. I got thinking about Mr. Edward, who's been doing this a long time, and he's delivered a lot of good messages, not just here, but in other places, you know. And I thought, just 25 years, and then I think about all he's done. So that's like, wow, that's a big difference. And a lot of people back then lived to be quite an old age, you know. A lot of good life left in them, as they say. And there was another thing too, is that according to Deuteronomy, a Levite was allowed to move from anywhere in Israel to the cult site chosen by the Lord and to serve there with the other Levites. But this guy was wandering around. I mean, he was just going from place to place, trying to find a home, and he's a rogue. I mean, he wasn't necessarily a good person, or he wasn't actually a preacher. We don't know that. We just know he was a Levite. And it doesn't say it here in this readings that we have today for the lesson, but later on it comes that the 5 men from Dan that came to the house and stayed with them, He actually later on sided with them and became a preacher for them, and Micah's just left on his own. So he wasn't necessarily, it doesn't seem like a godly man neither. You know, it just looked like he was, they worked out a deal for him to stay there. He got 10 shekels a year, but he got all the food he wanted and had a place to live. So it didn't seem like, you know, and it's at his own house, so it doesn't seem like anything's being followed. Does anybody have any comments? Because I'm just talking, but struggling.
It's the irony of this is Michael was not a lazy man. He looks like he was trying to serve God, but he just didn't study, he didn't do any research to find out what does God want me to do. He just kind of, like it said, did what seemed right to him.
Right in your own eyes, and that's what I'm saying. It's mentioned many, many times, and I was speaking with Eric earlier today, and he was asking me how he was wondering how this lesson is going to tie in with his lesson, and I was saying there's a lot of idolatry that's mentioned on later on, and so that's where I'm thinking it's going to lead to help him, but I don't want to jump too far ahead. And I read it, but I didn't read his lesson, but I read the rest of the book of Judges to see how all this worked out. But it also says here in our reading, it says, the perversion of idolatry leads to all manner of sexual and social perversion. Nothing is left unsaved. So, but we get him in the house, and he takes him, and it says like a son. So he worships with him, he dwells with him, he leads the way, and Micah thinks, he says, I know that the Lord will be with me, since I have a Levite as a priest. And my thing is, why is it just because he's a Levite? Is anybody, I mean, what do you think? Why do you think he thinks he's safe just because he's a Levite? I mean, we know that, like I said, all Levites, the priest has to be a Levite, but not all Levites are priests.
Well, he knew enough to know that the priest should come from the tribe of Levi. That's why he felt better about having Levi as a priest rather than his own son. Of course, his spirituality is, I mean, it mentions his mom and what kind of person she was. I mean, he was kind of following what he had been taught in his home, evidently. He knew a little bit about God's word, because the Levite is, and he knew what he was being taught at home, and he was kind of, I think Johnny Ray was trying to do the best he could with what he knew, but he wasn't really, I think, desperately seeking the will and the word of God. He was just kind of doing his own thing, and I don't know, the 1,100 and then the 200, that's not even 10% if you wanted to cut the Lord out of the other 900. So, they were kind of doing a little bit what was right, but mixed in with a whole lot of wrong. And just it don't take much wrong to be wrong, does it? So
No, that's right.
it's kind of amazing that the Lord does this. He throws these things in the Bible to make us realize, okay, here's what I want you to do, but this is really what's happening. So you got to learn to distinguish between, what's wrong with what is right, and this is kind of a lesson in wrong, I guess.
Yeah. And again, I go back to, there is no king, there is no ruler, there is nobody to enforce the rules, and so I guess I compare assimilate it, I make it, make sense to my head by saying, if God hadn't left us the commandments, our plan, what we're supposed to do, what would civilization really be like? And we have a lot of people who don't know, or who don't care, or don't follow it. But there's enough people that do, that keeps, I know it seems like there are a lot of people that aren't following it, or they kind of, in their own eyes, I'm close. It's not exactly, I'm close. I'm right here on this line. I may stick my foot over the line, but as long as I don't step over it, I hadn't crossed the line.
I don't know where it would go in here. I'm working on a lesson, and our beliefs, our faith, our doctrine, it's ours. you know, it can be totally wrong. But how many people in here want to hold up their sign and say, well, my faith is wrong? Nobody that's your belief. You automatically believe that way, so it's right in your own mind, in your own heart. And how do you get someone who has believed a lie and has this wrong belief, how do you get them to go back and change? Because I can go out there on the streets of Carthage or Nashville and say, how many of y'all believe you're right? I mean, that's almost 100%. You know, they may say, well, I might be wrong a little bit here, but basically I believe, my belief is right. Well, that's true of everybody on the planet, you know. And so how do you get someone to, you know, say, okay, it has to come from a higher authority. It can't come from me. I can't tell you that you're wrong. You can't, good luck with telling me that I'm wrong or anybody. You know, people have to put that, have to yield that power, and they're only going to yield it to someone who they think is greater than themselves, I believe. And that's why there was no king, kind of like a reference to God. In their minds, there probably wasn't a God. You know, they kind of acknowledge that there's a God, like a lot of us sometimes, you know, we acknowledge that there's a God, but are we really surrendering to him? Is he really the king? Is he really Lord of our life? You know, and that really wasn't happening here. And God is saying, look, it doesn't take long for y'all to go your own way unless you submit to my authority.
Yeah, I mean, throughout, like I said, and like you're saying, throughout the whole book of Judges, it's the constant revolving door. You know, we start off, we're bad, we get some help, we get going right, and then we start slowly backsliding until we get in a bad spot, and then here we go again. Please, Lord, help us. If you'll help us this time, we'll follow, we'll do right, and then so we do right for a little while, then we start backsliding again. And I guess, and we're lucky, we're fortunate that we do have this, depending on what version you have, in black and white, or maybe some red in there too, you know, of what to do and how to be, you know, how to act and things like that. And talking about the beliefs, where society is changing, and it's not for the better. I mean, in a lot of ways. I can probably, not trying to put nobody on the spot, but say Coach Bray or Miss Christie there, or anybody else that's a teacher, I can tell you firsthand, a lot of things that I'm being told I have to accept because it's against my belief is getting really hard. It's really hard. I've contemplated several times. I've got several years in, but do I need to go a different direction? And if it gets too bad, I will. I mean, I'm not going to accept just everything. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to be that way. But now the one thing that I wanted to make a reference to and a comparison is what the lesson to me is trying to say is not to put anybody in front of God. In this case, it's idols. And one of the things I see with young kids is they idolize like superstars, whether it's basketball, football, NASCAR. I mean, we can go. I loved Michael Jordan when I was a kid, and I had jerseys and I had T-shirts and I had tennis shoes and ball caps and stuff like that. And you know, I was smart enough to know though that that's just a figure. You know, but there's lots of kids who think, you know, Tiger Woods was an adulterer. It's okay. He did it. Why can't I? You know, or well, if he can go out, you see some of these, they drink after the national championships that they win. Well, if it's okay for them, it's okay for me, you know. But we've got to educate people and not put them, you know, up on that platform. It's a person, and that person should be following the right path and not putting the wrong foot forward. And Charles Barkley said in an interview one time, and I know I'm dating myself with Charles Barkley, but they was interviewing him, and they were talking about some of the things that he had done. He was a gambler. I mean, that's no, you know, secret. He drank. I mean, on TV and stuff. And they said, what message are you saying to the kids? And I'll never forget this. He looked at him, he said, I'm saying to the kids, don't idolize me. The people you need to idolize and follow are your mamas and daddies. The people who brought you in this world, who should be taking you to church and teaching you right from wrong. He said, I'm not the right person to watch. So he said, I don't want anybody to idolize me. He said, I'm just being me. But I thought that was a pretty good message because, I mean, like I said, I was young. I was a high school kid at that time, and I enjoyed watching him. But, you know, he was saying, don't be like me. Do the right thing. So I think that's one thing that, you know, we need to take from this lesson is not to put anything above God and His Word. Any other thoughts? Nope. Well, that's my lesson. I mean, I didn't have much and done the best I could with it. Thank you very much.